Well, today we honor moms, right? Most importantly, we honor God for sending us moms. But we do want to make sure that everyone is honored here, because it's not just moms. Not everybody can be a mom, right? I can't be a mom. Just go ahead and let it be out, put it out there. So moms is a special job. And some moms really do a really great job. But we also know there's some moms that maybe have fallen a little short. I'm not saying they didn't do the best they could, but they've fallen short. And some of you have moms that I call surrogate moms, somebody in the neighborhood who took an interest in you to help raise you. Some of you have helped raise other people's children, right? You reach out and you've taken them under your wing because you love them. Because it's easy to love kids, isn't it? And you're basically a surrogate mom, and I salute you as well. So I want to honor all those people who affect young children's lives, that have taken an interest in their development. But especially we want to lift up moms. Moms are so full of wisdom, aren't they? All moms think you got that right. And they tell us all these smart things and advise us through life, but sometimes it takes us a long time to realize that they're smart. Right? It takes a long time for us to understand what they were talking about and understand that they were doing it for our best interest, right? And some of the things we just don't understand when they say it. But then years later we find ourselves repeating them back to our children, the same things, and we say, we catch ourselves like, oh, I sound just like my mother. I gotta stop. What is wrong with me? Right? Because they are smart. They do have a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience. But some of the things you'll never hear your mom say. Why don't you come a little closer to the TV? Yeah, about 1 foot. That's going to be really good for your eyes. It's almost like being at a movie theater if you sit this close. Why don't you sit up here? Or just leave the door open. The outside is hot, and those creatures out there probably need some of our air conditioning. Just leave that door open. Or yeah, sure, leave the lights on. It makes it so bright and cheery. Electric bill is not really that important. It's just something else that we get in the mail. These are things that you don't hear your mom say, is it? You ever heard your mom say anything like that? No? Why? Because it's not really a smart thing to say, is it? Moms give us a lot of wisdom, and we need to be respectful of the wisdom that they bring us. And, they fill our lives with a lot of different insights as we grow up. Things to do and things not to do. And probably one of the things your mom may have told you is the golden rule, right? Have you ever heard of the golden rule? What's that? Do unto others as you have them do unto you. Or I'm sorry about that. I bought a new Bible and it's very slick. So we'll set it right here. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? Or the Bible version is love one another, love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? That's probably an easier version to remember. But in today's passage, Jesus kind of changes the golden rule. He comes and it's a slight change, but it's an important change. He comes in, and we'll start on verse 12. It says, my command is this: love one another as I have loved you. There's an important difference there. Not as you love yourself, but as I have loved you. The first thing that we need to understand here is this is a command. It's not a suggestion. Moms, sometimes they give you a suggestion, like, you might not want to do that. It's not going to end well. You might want to rethink what you're doing. That's a suggestion, right? But sometimes they also give us commands, and you shouldn't confuse the two, right? It's not healthy. I can remember as a teenager, I was about to go to a friend's house, and my dad said, hey, how about taking out that trash? And I said, feeling kind of jokey. He said, it's not my job, man. Kind of like, it's over some of you said, but there was an old show that Freddie Prinze was in, Chico and the Man, and he used to always say, "It's not my job, man." And I was kind of mimicking that. I said, "Not my job, man." He said, "I want you to take out that trash." Now, I'm not sure what the correct response to that was, but I can tell you what it wasn't. The correct response wasn't, "We all have wants." Because no more had that left my mouth, and I turned to see his reaction, than he was upon me, we should say. And let me tell you, his wants became my wants very quickly, and that trash was taken out. But it's important here for us to see that what Jesus does is he commands us. And commands are meant to be obeyed, right? We need to have a set of rules, set of disciplines, things that are healthy for us, right? And Jesus gives us his command to love one another. That doesn't mean it's optional, but sometimes commands are hard to follow, aren't they? It's amazing to me how many people who claim to be followers of Christ have such a hard time following his commands. You know, this book, these scriptures that we read are filled with God's promises, but they're also filled with instructions on how we're to live our life. There's also commands in here. There's also rules in here. There's instructions on how to live a life that's pleasing to God. And we can't just pick out the things that we like, right? We can't just pick out the things that are appealing to us, because when you do that, then you're creating your own God, right? You're just like the people who made the golden calf, right? Why would you worship something that you created? If you created it, then you're bigger than it, right? Same thing here. We can't pick and choose. It's full of rewards, but it's also full of guidance for our lives. We need to follow those rules. But in this society today, there's very few things that are black and white. Things just seem to be gray, don't they? If it feels good, do it, right? But that's not what the scriptures tell us, is it? That's not what the Bible instructs us to do. That's not what Jesus told us to do. We're to follow these instructions. There was a man who had a company. I think Max Lucado gives this example in the book, that he had a company and he was going to go away. He had to go overseas for a while. And he gathered his people together and said, I'm going to be gone for a few years. He said, but don't worry, I'm going to write you a letter frequently to let you know what to do to keep this business running. But I'm going to leave you in charge. And he left, and he did as he promised. He wrote a letter, and he came back a few years later, and as he approached the front gates of the business, he saw the flower beds were overgrown and weeds had taken over. And he looked up at the building, and many of the windows had been knocked out and just cardboard had been placed up in there. And as he went through the doors, the receptionist was asleep at her desk. And as he went to his office, he just saw the place was in shambles. And he went and looked at the books. And the books were worse shape than the building. The company was losing money now. And so he called his people together and into a big meeting. He said, Did you all receive my letters? They said, yeah, every week. We got your letters. They were good letters. We read them. He said, as a matter of fact, we would get together every Friday and we would discuss the letters. And then we formed a group, small groups, and they would take the letters and dissect them even more, and they would memorize some parts of the letter. We even had a couple of guys that learned the whole letter. They memorized the whole letter. They know the whole thing. He goes, I get it. I understand. He said, I understand you got my letters. And I know you read my letters. But did you do any of the things that were in those letters? Do? We were supposed to do something? We just thought they were words on paper. We didn't know we were supposed to do anything. touches our lives. God's written us letters. Letters upon letters. Words of how to live our life. Instructions on what we should do. And we read them, and we meet, we discuss them. We sometimes have small groups that dissect them and study every letter. Right? Some of us memorize the verses. Some of us memorize books. But do we do what's in the book? Do we execute God's plan for life? That's the question. And it's very simple here, and it actually isn't that much to do. I mean, when we really sit and think about it, you have the Ten Commandments that were given to the people in the wilderness, that God sent the Israelites in the wilderness, and they couldn't get that right. I mean, it was 10 commandments. 10 things to do. They built on that, and they built on it where it's just impossible for people to even do it, because of the rules that built out of the rules that built out of the rules. And God sent Jesus, and He made it really simple. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and all your mind, and all your... That's one. And today, He upgrades the other one. He says, love your neighbor as I have loved you. 2 things. You couldn't handle 10. I'm going to give you 2 things to do. Can you do those 2 things? Can you live a life of love? It's easy to love those who love us. We all know that. Or most of the time it's easy. But it's hard sometimes to love those who don't love us, isn't it? Who frustrate us, who make us angry, who know how to push our buttons, who are contrary or ornery or just rude. Right? Or people who have a different opinion than we do. It's hard to love them, isn't it? Pam gave a talk at one of our meetings a couple of weeks ago. And she said, you know, when she gets angry with people, she gets angry with the student, she just says, has to remind herself, you know, for God so loved the world that He sent His Son for, and she'll put the student's name in there, and it kind of reminds her that God's love's for all people. And she said, and when the clerk at the grocery store makes me angry, I just say, for God so loved the world that He loved so and so. And she said, and when I get angry at home, I just have to say, for God so loved the world that He sent His Son for Kenny. That's because I have a way of pushing her buttons just like everybody else, right? But it's hard to love those people who are contrary, isn't it? It's kind of a different type of love that we have to experience. And I think first we have to really get a handle on what love is. You know, there's all types of love. I know there was a writer a man, editor called in and said, I want you to write a poem for Valentine's Day about love. She said, but first I want you to tell me what love is. And she said, love, love. Love is sitting with the one who's closest to you by the moonlight, looking at a lily pond and the lilies are in full bloom. He said, stop. He said, let me tell you what love is. He said, love is getting out of a warm bed on a cold night to take care of a child. He said, that's love. Because that's sacrificial love. You're having to give something up, right? When you have to make a sacrifice to love somebody, that's love. That's God's love. That's agape love. You see, God sacrificed His Son because He loved you so much. And the sacrificial love that He expects from you is sometimes to love those who it's difficult to love. Those ornery people, those contrary people, those people who don't like you. It's not easy, is it? No. There was a story I read this week about a man who who was having a hard time with his coworker. As a matter of fact, they just didn't like each other. You might say they hated each other. They couldn't even speak to each other. Every time he saw him, just his blood pressure got up. He just went, You ever know anybody like that? I don't know people like that. You ever know anybody like that? He said, and he prayed about it. He didn't know what to do about it. But he knew he wasn't supposed to hate it. He hated it. Boy, he just didn't like it. He said, and one day he was sitting there and he heard the door of the basement slam, and his son ran up to his room and slammed the door. And he went there to find out what was going on. His son was sitting there crying. He said, what's going on? He said he was playing street hockey, and that the other team had scored a goal. And when they did, his teammates started giving him a hard time. So, you're worthless. We'd be better off if you just went home and left the goal empty. We'd be better served than having you sitting in that goal. You're completely incompetent. And of course, that infuriated the man. Somebody would say that to his son. So he went to his room and threw on a jacket and was trying to get his shoes on. He heard God's voice saying, Mark, where are you going? So I'm going down the street. Those boys talk to my son. I'm going down there to set them straight. He said, well, why are you going down? He said, they hurt my son. He said, oh, I understand. He said, you have a father's love in your heart. He goes, yes, I do. He said, yes. It hurts me when someone hurts one of my children, too. And for the first time, Mark got it. That we're all God's children. And when we hurt one another, when we say unkind words to each other, when we turn our back on those who are in need, it hurts God. It breaks his heart. Doesn't it, think about that for a minute. Doesn't it make you mad when somebody does something to one of your children? All you moms can relate to this, because I know moms turn into grizzly bears at times when people mess with their children. You don't come between a mother and a child. I'm going to just tell you. I've seen it, and it's not pretty. But really, doesn't it hurt you? I know as a father, it infuriates me. I'm going to tell you mess with my kids, I have to really hold on to my religion tight, because otherwise I think I'd lose it. But that's a way to get me angry. You can do a lot of things to me, but if you go to my children, then it's a whole different thing. And think about that passion that we have for our children. That God has that passion for each of us. He loves each of us that way. And when someone does something to you, or when you do something to someone else, it hurts him. It hurts him. You see, because we're all God's children. You didn't know you were all related, did you? Look around, see your relatives' faces. Are you the good-looking brother? We'll get into that another day. But there are a lot of children out there in the world that we're going to encounter, right? That need our help, that are hungry, that are homeless. They just need to be loved. There was a story of a bus driver from Winnipeg, and he was driving along, and he came and he stopped the bus at an unscheduled stop, and the passengers just looked like, what are you doing? And he got out, and there was a homeless man sitting there, and he went and talked to the homeless man for a minute, and then he took off his shoes. This guy's name was Chris Double D was his name. He took off his shoes and he gave them to the homeless man, and then he got on the bus and he drove off. And the passengers asked him, said, what did you do that for? He said, I passed that man several times, and I just couldn't pass him again. It seemed that he had no shoes. And it just felt like it was told to me to give him my shoes, and he needed them worse than I did. And so that's what I did. And as crazy as that sounds, as radical as that sounds, isn't that what Jesus would have done? Isn't that what we're called to do? To help those who are in need? You know, It's funny, after 2,000 years, you wouldn't think this is a radical thought. You know, you would think by now it kind of would have sunk in, and as Christians we would embrace this. It's love your neighbor as you love yourself. But for many it hasn't. For many, they can see starving children and it doesn't bother them. And I can tell you that if you see children hurting, if you see children starving and it doesn't touch your heart, you need to include yourself in your prayer. Because you have some spiritual growing to do. Because what hurts God should hurt you. What touches God's heart should touch yours. When you see children hurting or you see people hurting, it should move you. It should move you to do something. Not just say, well, that's sin. Sure it is. It is sin. Now let's do something about it. Let's make a change. Let's fix what we can fix. You know, when I pray, I've heard God say a lot of things. I've never heard him say, Kenny, just don't worry about that guy over there who's homeless. He probably deserves it. Never heard him say that. I never heard him say, don't worry about those hungry people. They could use a diet anyway. They probably could miss a few. Never said that. Never heard him say that. But I can tell you in my prayers, I've heard him say, feed the hungry. Embrace those who are on the fringes of society. Make everyone feel welcome. Love your neighbors. Take care of the homeless. Take care of those who can't take care of themselves. Fight for those who are too weak to fight for themselves. And above all else, what I've heard him say, and what you should hear him say today is, love your neighbor as I have loved you. And all God's people said, amen.